Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Runners Roundtable. In season 4, I am speaking to inspiring female runners who not only inspire me, but also inspire the community of runners that we come from. And today I am thrilled and excited and just very, very honored to speak to Verna Volker of Native Women Running on the podcast this week. And as I was prepping for this episode, I realized I have Coach Becky Croft, and I don't know who she is, but she's the one that has really expanded my eyes in terms of Native women running. And it was a conversation that I had with her earlier this year, and we were talking about inclusivity with running. And she talked about how we can't really talk about inclusivity without addressing missing and murdered Indigenous women. And that was just such an eye-opening just conversation for me that really highlighted the fact that unless we talk about things and unless we open ourselves up to being uncomfortable, we don't even know who's missing from the conversation of who's running, who's showing up to run, who is running for, and then who is running leaving behind. So I just wanted to shout her out, because she was the one in that conversation. She's like, so you need to follow this account, this account, this account, this account. And she just gave me a whole list of people to follow. And it was done so kindly, because I'm always very aware of, I don't want you to do any additional labor to educate me. I can figure it out. So I just want to shout her out and once again, just thank her for guiding me in the direction of you and the work that you are doing. But before we dive further into that work, can you tell us about yourself and how you came to running in the first place?
Yes. So my name is Verna Volker. I'm from the Navajo Nation, and I always introduce myself in the Navajo culture. We have a clan system, and so I will just kind of do that briefly. My name is Verna Volker. I'm born of the Bitterwater Mud people. Also, the Tango people and the water flows together people. I am a mother of 4 kids that range from the age of 20 to 11. And I've been married for almost 24 years. And so, yeah, we live here in Minneapolis. And so this is where I call home for the last 15 years is where we've been living. So, yes. And so I talk a lot about my journey on my personal account. I did not start running until later in life. And Native runners, especially Navajo runners, they start really young. And there's like generations of runners in their families. I was not one of them. And so I started running when we moved here in 2009. I had 3 little guys at that time who are now like taller than me. And we moved here. And it was then that I was taking care of everybody and I wasn't taking care of myself because that's just kind of normal. And that's when I started running here in Minnesota. And so I always talk about how I started running not in my homeland, and I started running here on the Dakota lands. And so I'm very grateful to be able to have started my journey here in Minnesota.
Yeah, I thank you for sharing that, because I feel like a lot of people think that the people who are running have always been running. And it's like, no, there's, I'd say at this point of the people that I've spoken to, it's 50-50. You've either got people who grew up running and continued into adulthood, and the other 50 is going to be people who discovered running for whatever reason later in life. And I feel you on the whole, you kind of get lost in the mix of parenthood or lost in the mix of caring for other people, and running something that similar for me was that it was actually the thing I could do while I was with my kids, right? It's the thing I could do outside. I could put them in a stroller and we could run. And over time, it truly became something for myself because I saw how running connected me to a me without titles or expectations
Right.
or any of that. I could just go out and run and breathe, really breathe.
Right. For
I tell
sure.
people
Yeah.
that all the time. It's for me, running is freedom. That's when I can go out
Right.
and I can be free.
Exactly.
So you start running, and running started off as something individual. At what point did it become this more collective? I don't even know if that's the right
Yeah.
word for it.
Yeah. So when I started running, I was pretty new to the sport. So I was very clueless about running shoes, like training. I didn't even have a running watch. So I was just running, but I remember just educating myself on that. And it wasn't until I signed up for my first race. And I always tell people, don't do what what I did. I signed up for a half marathon. And so it's like when you're starting off, do like a 5K, But I did that half marathon and of August of 2009. And that's when I think my whole life changed, because at the time I was still getting healthier, and it was that moment where I was like, I can actually do this. And from then I just kept going. So that's kind of how it started. And I think in the last couple of years, it's become more of a mental, uh, it's more mental for me than it is like physically. I'm noticing that my body's changing. I'm not as fast. I'm more tired, things like that as you age. So it's really changed. And now it's kind of like just mental endurance. So
Yeah, it's like welcome to womanhood. And
yes.
no one really prepares you for what the aging process is like. I feel like we go through multiple puberties throughout our lives. And if you have children, that was my first taste of that after my first daughter was born.
Right.
My body felt so foreign to me. I felt like I wouldn't say that there was anger, but there were definitely moments of, wow, I spent the past X amount of years learning to love my body. And then I had a child, and I'm happy that my body was able to do what it did in order
Right.
to birth a child. But then the child is out of my body, and all of a sudden, I feel disconnected and everything feels different. Clothing fits different. I'm viewed differently now because I'm
Right.
a mother, and no one prepares you for that coming into a
Right. For sure.
different embodiment of self.
Uh-huh.
So it is hard. But now, because you first signed up for a half marathon, but what are the distances you like to run now?
Well, I started more as a road runner, and I think in the last, I would say 6 years, I switched over to trail running, and I really enjoy like running ultras. And so I have a handful of ultras that I've done. From almost a year ago, I attempted 100 miler, and I got to 94 miles. And then time just ran out. So I always say, even though it's like I got 94, people are always like, okay, that's still a lot of miles. And I've done a 50 miler, like 50 milers and 50K. And so I think for like road running, I like the distance of a 10K, whereas like ultras, I like a 50K, which it takes me 8 hours. I can still be home in a good time. I'm not running through the night, like these long ultras where you're running through the night, barely sleeping. So I think that's what's changed. And I think that's what is in my mind, the wise thing to do as my body changes, as things are changing in my knees and things like that, that it's probably a wise decision to scale back.
I love that how I thought you were going to say something like on the roads, I prefer the half or maybe even a marathon. You're like, no, a 10K on the roads, 50K in the trails.
It's weird because I ran the New York City Marathon, and I've ran these like Chicago, but now that I've become a trail runner, there's always this transition now. It's a really humbling experience because trail running, you can be slow, you want to walk, whereas road running is this pressure of you can't even stop because you just feel weird. Like if I walk, so it's always a transition, and I just celebrate each moment. I'm not fast, and I'm like, I finished a marathon. I'm very happy about that. So
Yeah, I had I had a marathon recently, and one of my thoughts during that race was, why do we focus so much on time? Don't get me wrong. I know
I
that
agree.
people are very motivated by time and people do incredible things with time. But all I could think about, and again, I had an interesting experience during that race, but all I could think about was, if we don't even get to start and we never make it to the finish line, time doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. And 26.2 miles is 26.2 miles. 13.1 is 13.1. Like,
I agree.
it's still the distance. And I find that I'm seeing that the dialogue is changing a bit in terms of,
Yeah.
at least when I first started running. So I'm curious for you, when you first started running, can you walk us through what the landscape of running was for you? And maybe even, how those first few races that you went to, what was your experience at them? And I ask that because, and I've shared this before on the podcast, I live in Miami, Florida, and I'm a Latin woman surrounded by lots of Latin culture. And whenever I go to races, I feel welcomed. I'm going to races surrounded by faces and culture and language that is my own. And I like to highlight that that's not always the case for everyone. So I'm curious what your experience was when you first started going to races, or just in general, how you received the running community, received or perceived the running community back in your early years of running.
Yeah. For sure. Like from the beginning, I I guess I just really, like when I started running, I didn't really notice it. It was like I just kind of went, but I always knew that I was the only brown person. And that's kind of what I always expected. And as I started doing, like, I remember doing the Twin City Marathon, which is here in Minneapolis, and it's a big major one. It's interesting how the big marathons is just so diverse, like Chicago. So you don't feel like you're out of place. But I feel like that I sense that more in the trail ultra communities because it's smaller and you're at this race and you're only only brown person on a trail race. I think that's what I noticed when I started more so with ultra trail running. And I feel like that is kind of when I decided, let's do some research. Why is it like this? And so I think that's when I noticed. I feel like here in Minnesota too, we do have Native people here, but I rarely see Native people at the even road races and ultra races here. And it's very far and few here in Minnesota. Whereas in Arizona, there's more of a population of like my tribe, like Navajo, where you would see more Navajo people in those spaces, but it just seems very far and few here in Minnesota.
Is that an access issue? In your opinion, is it that people are just not interested in running? Is it that the races are cost prohibitive, or running is cost prohibitive, or just, I talk about it frequently too, about, you go to run clubs or these training programs and maybe you don't feel comfortable there.
Right. I think it's kind of a lot of different things. Now, for me, it's taken time to get a group of Native women here. So I have a good group, like maybe 15, that has progressed in the last year, who are from here, Native people from the Minnesota area, because I invited them to a race. And then we came together, and now we're on a group chat, and they're the ones that come to my events here in Minnesota. And I think it's what I hear, and their feedback is it's so nice to connect with Native women here in the Twin Cities. I think there are runners, it's just no one is connecting them. And so I feel like that's kind of what I've been doing, is connecting the Native runners in this area. So, and it's been cool to see that, like, just forming this group chat and saying, hey, I'm going to have an event in December. And they're all like, hey, let's do that. So it's been really cool.
I think that brings up an interesting point in terms of the individual nature of running, and yet the community aspect of it. And one of the things I often say is that we're all one connection away from falling in love with this sport. And
Right.
providing those connections for people. It's just, I always wonder, I'm like, so why don't we see more, whether it be, I mean, I think here for me in Miami, it would be more along the lines of, why don't we see older women running, right? Why don't we see more women? And I don't want to knock anyone who starts running to lose weight, but it's like, why don't we also see more women who just want to feel good in their body pick up
Right.
running? Like,
Exactly.
what's the messaging behind running, or how people understand running to be that they're feeling that's not either the sport for them, the place for them, or that they don't belong for whatever reason. And I think to me, it's just always so interesting, because it is your proof that that one connection, which is you,
Right.
can transform a space. And
Right.
I'm just always curious. I'm like, how do we get more women into this sport, and how do we get them to, again, just love being in their bodies?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that just takes, like, for me, it takes time. I think for like our Indigenous women, we always talk about how we are still the minority, even in the minority spaces. And, we show up at places and there's like 2 Native women runners. And I think that's why that motivates me for Native women running, because it's creating this like movement for us, that we are here and that we come together. And that's been pretty powerful to see Native women coming together. And I think that gives them a sense of comfort, saying, these people, these Native women look just like me. And so that's, it just takes, for me, I know it's just taken time, because I created this space in 2018, but I feel like in the last year, it finally has developed here in Minnesota.
Yeah, and speaking of the online, the Instagram community that you have, because that's one of the things that I just want to know how you did that, right? Because it's not only, and it's a two-part question of the how, because it's not only are you featuring women, which I guess it's a three-part question, in terms of, are you noticing that more women are tagging the account or using the hashtag online and getting like your attention? So that's kind of that's one question. But then the other question that I have is, because when I follow the Instagram page, it seems like you're doing two things there. One, you're amplifying Native women that are running and doing amazing things in their own way. And then two, you're also putting teams together for events. So how do you do all that? Just how do you do it?
Well, I do a lot. I'm still kind of a one-person team. I have like 3 women on my leadership team, but I do my best to not give them too much, because they have regular jobs, and I'm not, they use their gifts in different ways. And so I am basically the social media manager and also coordinating these teams. I think when I always talk about how we started the online community before the pandemic. And I think what works is simplifying everything. I could we do a little bit of advocacy, but I am not in 6 places. We're doing this. I keep the mission simple, which is representation in the running space for Native women who live on the reservation, off the reservation. That's it. And so I feel like everyone deserves to be on a platform. For example, I have been, people know who I am, and I do my best to never share my personal stuff on Native women running, because everyone should have this platform, whether you just started a 5K to whether you ran Boston, that everyone should have a platform and that they should shine. So that's my first thing, is everyone deserves to shine. And also, when we created this teams, I was thinking of something easy to do at the time. One of the Native gals who was following, who is now in our leadership team, was going to run a race the year of 2022. And she said, yeah, there's like 7 of us running this race. And I was like, hey, why don't I pay for your registrations and we can create a team around that event? She's like, that sounds great. And so they ran under Native Women Running. It went really well. From then on, that's just what works, because we are creating these pockets of community in different places and races, and reaching out to women in that community who are in Oregon. So focusing on the Native women in that area so they can get to the races, and being able to provide the means. We're providing opportunities, but we're also breaking down those barriers of, I can't get there. So we do our best to pay for whatever we can so they could get to the finish line. And it creates a community where they actually become friends and they start to run together. So I think that's kind of like, I'm amazed of how each team, of the feedback that we've gotten, is they love that weekend because they've only known each other through a group chat. And now they're just like, why can't I just have that weekend? Especially when we went to New York City, like the marathon, like we only knew each other through a group chat, but we met, and it was like, now we're like, I wish we could go back and hang out, and that's the sad part about this whole thing, is like, oh, I wish I could just keep these women together all the time. But I feel like that's been what has become of it. I feel like it's easier to do this because I work with race companies to provide that, and just creating a team makes sense. So it's working for us. And so I'm keeping that mission, again, simple, of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I'm going to admit something here, that when I sent an email out, I did not expect your name to pop up in my inbox. Like, that threw me off. I was like, wait a minute. Why is this name in my inbox? Because you've done an excellent job of that, of not centering yourself in the experience. So for me, I was like, hold on, is this the person that I think it is? And then it was just like, all right, Steph, we're good. Like we're fine here. But I just appreciate that so much, because we all have very different stories when it comes to running. Mm-hmm. And not everyone's going to relate to your story, just like not everyone's going to relate to my story. Right. But there might be another person that shows up on the page where all of a sudden it's, oh, wait a minute, if she's doing it and she reminds me of me, I see myself in her, then all of a sudden it becomes a possibility to chase after the same dream. Right. Yeah. So I'm going to ask something, because you feel like you kind of referenced it, and then you also posted something, and I'm just going to quote you real quick here.
Okay.
It should just be a given that race companies give free race registration to Indigenous runners when races are hosted on our land. And that felt like that was a declaration, and it was a statement, and it was period. Is that how you approach these race companies when it comes to getting race registrations for your teams?
Yeah, but I'm pretty, I don't know, I guess I'm a lot nicer in the email, but it's really, I say, we just want access to this. And I said, not many of our women can get to these races if you're going to put that barrier. And so I think that kind of helps. And actually, some race companies have been very like, this is truth. You're right. Like, you are 100% right. And I've had so many just like extend it to me without like any kind of like, you don't even have to tag us. This is for you. Whereas I've had some that are like, oh, we'll just give you a discount, and I'm like, I don't want some freaking discount, like, and I just feel like so far, like right now I'm working on that and making sure that I follow up with companies that we did last year. And so majority of them have been receptive of like, yes, Verna, we want to work with you. We have new people who are joining that. And I understand that it's a business, and, but what pride it is for them when they see a group of Native women who are running together at an event and seeing them cross a finish line, I think is good for them. And I think that's been kind of it's scary. I honestly have to say that it's scary because these people are much more educated in their profession, whereas I'm just a mother. I'm a mom, but also I was a teacher, which I feel like helps. I'm not a business person. I'm not like, and so I just am very honest. And again, I simplify, like, this is what we're doing. But I think being a mom and being a teacher has helped me kind of navigate these spaces. And it is scary and it's intimidating. But I feel like being honest and saying this is what we need really works with some companies. And those who shut us down are not ready. I don't want that in our company or in our organization. If we're going to have people who are arrogant or dismiss us, like, I don't want that, then that's like a red flag for me. So
Yeah, that kind of makes filtering through the races a lot simpler, right? And I
right,
find that even to what I quoted you, to what I just quoted you, where it's, they don't need you to tag them, right? Like,
right,
I'm gonna say it, and these race companies, and if someone listens to me disagrees with me, but it's like, you shouldn't need people to tag you. If what you're doing business wise is already getting enough people through the door, you don't need
right.
anyone else to tag you. Just offer up the space. When it's even going deeper, right? When we're thinking about that 30 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
30, 40 years ago, women were not running at all. And yet we see
Right,
now that the majority of runners are women.
right,
I always think about it in terms of the ripple effect of, if I go to this race and I have a great experience, I'm going to go home, and then next year, maybe I convince two of my friends to go do it. And all of a
right.
sudden,
Mm-hmm.
that one person turned into three. And it's the same thing with you, where if you go and you show up and you're, I don't want to simplify what you're doing, but if you're there boldly and beautifully
Right,
in the essence of who you are, that again, it's going to get more people to want to come. Those women who went with you to New York City,
mm-hmm.
now they're going to be inspired and motivated to maybe go back to New York City next year, or
Right,
to go into their communities and encourage more women to do it as well. So for me, I think of and again, I'm not a business person either. I'm not a business person. I'm more of a, it just kind of makes sense that if
right,
I say yes to you and I invite you in, that then I'm opening the door to a whole other community that
right.
has, for whatever reason, been disregarded or not
Mm-hmm.
acknowledged or not tapped into. So it's so interesting that you'll have and I guess it's interesting, or more just, I'm sorry that you've had the experience of people who are more concerned with their bottom line versus
Mm-hmm.
being humans and understanding the power of races to amplify humanity.
Exactly. And I always feel like, about 2 years ago, we had an incident with a race company who, just dismissed our voice and took something that was really beautiful and took offense to it. And, I'm not going to amplify them at all, and, blocking us and not even trying to like work things out. And I'm like, the part of me is like, we don't want to work with you. We don't even want to be part of a race company where this person who is a minority, who is from a different culture, doesn't see how important it is that you just dismissed our voice. It's like me dismissing your voice. where we're coming together. And I think that was a shock to me, that you don't even see what you did was wrong. And so I always feel like I need to come up with some kind of database, almost like a warning sign, but that's just not how I roll. But like, don't go to this race, and I've been finding ways to like find companies that are in that general area to like work with, and they've been receptive to that. Like, part of me is like, we want nothing to do with you, and even some who say, well, we have Native people, or we care about Native people, then to treat me, a founder, like crap, and coming into my space with your white fragility, and me not even like engaging with you and coming to me like, no, like, I don't want you. And this particular race has their token natives, and I'm like, we're not going to be part of that. And so I feel like that they don't realize the harm, and part of me is like, let them be. And so I have nothing to do with them, and sadly there's Native people who still want to do stuff with them, and I can't control that. And so I think that's kind of one of those things where from that experience 2 years ago, was probably a good thing for me, because in the last year, as I've worked with so many race directors, that I'm like, I know which ones are true allies, who truly care about us, and who doesn't, who still care about making money. Like, sadly, that's just how it is. It's a business.
Yeah. And that's something that's always hard to remember, right? All these businesses, they are businesses. Even your big races that have huge charity components to them, at the end of the day, they're still businesses, and their bottom line is going to be their bottom line. And I feel like it takes more than one voice screaming, right, things have to change. It needs to there has to be more people that believe in that change and that want that change. But you should start. I mean, and it doesn't even have to come from you, right? Like, on your website, you can just start like a database of reviews, and just have the people that are in your communities offer up reviews as to how was the right experience for you. So then it's not coming from you directly. Right. It's not you directly, but then it is something that is important for people to know, right? Because I also feel that we are in this time where running is kind of shape shifting, at least maybe on the smaller, more local level, maybe not so much your big races, but I find that it is changing more on the smaller, more local level, where there is more of an acknowledgement of the privilege we all have to run on the lands that we are running. And and I think back, so I had earlier in this season, I had Kelsey Long and Rebecca Bowman on, and they're Dirtbag Runners, or Dirtbag Runs is their community. And during our conversation, I had asked them a similar question to you of what's changed within the running community. And both of them are very much so in trail running. And Kelsey talked about how during one ultra race, she noticed that the photographer would put his camera down every time she ran past. And that was something that she noticed happen with her multiple times on this course. And those are those things where I'm like, those are the tells of a race. And that's where, your little database of how people feel, like, how safe do you feel? And not safe that you're going to come to harm, but safe in that you are respected as a human on these courses kind of comes into play. So I'm curious, you've worked with different race companies, and for the most part, the feedback has been positive from your runners.
Exactly.
But what other feedback do they give you in terms of, because it is a lot of effort on your part to reach out to race directors to even figure out which races would be good experiences, just in general, not just in general of this is a well put on event, there's hydration, there's fuel. What feedback usually goes back to you, or what feedback makes its way to you so that you know this is a company or this is a race that we would like to continue working with?
Yeah, I think one of the things is, I think the experience is them amplifying like our organization and amplifying, not just like at the race, but even before. Some of them will say, can we share this before? We want to like amplify that you guys are going to be there because it's very important to us. And then continue working with us like after the fact of that, and I think too, a lot of them have said it's so nice to see other Native women at these races, and that brings them comfort. And I struggle because like the land acknowledgement, a lot of them are doing land acknowledgements, but like I feel like going beyond that, and we're watching that, like who's going beyond that land acknowledgement by amplifying other Indigenous voices and organizations. And I think that's been one of those things that has helped. People like land acknowledgements, but as long as they've seen them doing the work. And I think that's been really helpful for them. I haven't really heard any like bad feedback of like, what Kelsey experienced. Majority have been pretty good of like different races. And I think it's just because I'm pretty flat out honest about how we should be treated. And majority of them have said that they have felt welcome in that space. And that's huge. That's good when they feel like they're welcomed in that space. And so I think that's been really good to see. And maybe it's because we have such a, we're getting to be well known in our organization, and we have a pretty good reputation. I think, where we try our best to put out there. Unfortunately, not everyone is going to agree with us, but I feel like being a leader in this space, I have to be honest of how we are treated, because if we are not, I'm not going to stay quiet on that.
What are some things that happen at races that we may not know is harmful?
Yes, I think I would say, for example, I have a good friend who has experienced certain racism in the space where she worked with a white gentleman man, who a race director who made a logo for the race that was very offensive, and she called him out. Because she called him out, he basically turned against her. And because she even today is using her voice against this race company, everyone is siding with him. And they're saying that she is the problem. I have approached different running organizations here in the city who are supported by this running company and said, you shouldn't work with them. And these supposedly people who are working with BIPOC runners don't see the harm in that. Again, dismissing my voice and her voice, that's harmful. And also just attacking us, I mean, just certain things like, like making us feel like our voice is, in these spaces, like not even like just dismissing us. So I feel like with the logos on what you create, make sure that you always check in. Like sometimes I'm like, who is your PR person? Like you have to be careful what you do, and also just what you write. And so it just, those kind of things are so important, because we don't want to see a logo that's offensive and then be like, that's not a race for me. I think that has been some of the things that I've seen. I do my best to always be at these races so that I can see what's going on. And so far, I watch, and people do listen to me. Example, like we work with a race company where they hosted on the Navajo Nation, and it happened during the eclipse. And in our culture, the eclipse is something that you don't even go outside. And so we pulled out of that race because out of respect for the Navajo people. This race continued, I think, but we told them why we weren't coming, but they also asked us for what, we had no clue about this. So one of our runners educated them. So it's like they took that into consideration. I think they moved that race in the afternoon. So I think that's what they did. So I think those things are good, because if they just continued during that time and not listen to the people around them, I think that would have been very harmful. So I don't know. Those are just some of the things that I think.
Yeah, no, those are great
Mhm.
examples, especially when you're talking about a race logo, right? Like your race logo,
Right.
that is the visual of an event. That is
Mm-hmm.
the visual that really sets the tone. I mean, that's the visual that you put on the website. Maybe it's on
Mm-hmm.
the medal, maybe it's on the t-shirt. Like we're talking about multiple different areas of a race experience that are impacted by a logo. And if
Exactly.
a logo is harmful, we're talking about, again, levels of harm that go into that.
Exactly.
And it's so interesting because it's not, I find, and this is just for me and where I'm at, where it takes a lot of subtracting your ego from the equation to learn, right?
Right.
It's like, oh, I didn't know that. I don't want to put the education piece on you, but if you can just educate me, then I can do some more research. But it takes that, because I feel like you'll have some people that you may approach them, and instead of them stepping back and considering it, it's like they dig their heels in
Right.
even
Mm-hmm.
deeper. And it's like, again, you're missing out on an opportunity to connect with a greater community because you want to continue serving the community that you have, right? Like
Right.
instead of
Right.
opening yourself up to more people, which, you know, in a business mind frame, you've got so much untapped potential out there. You've got
Right.
untapped communities out there that could participate. Again, just untapped potential there. I'm curious because you've said both words, and this is me asking for education now. The importance of language. Is there a difference when it comes to saying Native women and Indigenous women?
No, those I feel like are good ways, like Indigenous and Native. Those are the things I use. And more importantly, we ask that you know, address us by like our tribe, especially if you know our tribe, like Navajo. I'm a Navajo woman. So we really, those are things that I think they come together, like Native and Indigenous. Those are the two that I use. Some people, I rarely see people use like American Indian,
Mhm.
I think it's, or people use Native American, but we just say Native. It seems like that's been working, and Indigenous, and specifically like the tribe that person's from.
Is that something you've encountered in your work of having to, not having, but helping women embrace that aspect of themselves?
Yes, I think so. I think we have Native women who are reconnecting, who may have been adopted and who are reconnecting. I feel like we do a pretty good job with our like leadership team of opening our arms to like anyone. Um, we have to, and especially in this day and age, we have to be careful, because I don't want to deal, like I don't want to ask people for their status card, their Indigenous card, but we've had to have these experience where, when people claim that they're Indigenous and then they're not, that's been the hardest thing right now, is like, I mean, having people messaging me say so and so that you chose is not from an Indigenous community. And it's like, that is where it makes me stuck. And then like, I don't want to be asking people if they're really Native. I assume that you are, and that I just have good faith that you are. But now we're having to deal with that kind of stuff that I don't even want to address, but we have to address it, because it's harmful to our communities. And so I feel like that's kind of been, and that's hard, but in the same way, we have been welcoming to those who are reconnecting and coming back to their roots, who maybe were adopted, and who are coming back. We hope that we're welcoming, and I feel like we are. And so I think that in those ways have been very positive.
Yeah, and I think for people who may not know this, because I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, I learned about it's like memberships into your community, right? And
Yeah.
I actually learned about that in a book that I read recently. I think maybe last year, The Firekeeper's Daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful book and very enlightening, where I'm like, oh, this is something I had no clue about. So for people who are listening, it's because you had mentioned in the beginning too that there are women who live on the reservations and then women
Mm-hmm.
not. But in both cases, if women are, for instance, like yourself, you are a part of Navajo Nation, there is a card that you do have that says
Mm-hmm.
this person is a part of Navajo Nation.
Yes, yes, we do. But also I think what really matters too is your community where you're from. Like you can claim that you are native, but but I always know if you're not native is you have to be connected to a community. Like who are your family? Where are you from? Where are your parents from? Like those are huge. And if someone is not answering those unless they're like reconnecting, that's to me a red flag. Like, and again, there are tribes up in Canada where you pay a fee to a membership. Like you should not even be paying something like that,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I've, in the past couple of years, there's been like, well, this is all I've known. This is what my parents told me. Part of me is like, that's not on me. Like you have to educate yourself and find your own roots if you are not native at all. Like it's just like, because that puts this a lot of weight on me to carry because I'm like, I don't want to be checking this. I don't want to be this gatekeeper. Like, and so I think that's been really hard sometimes in this space of like, we're being native is popular, but at the same time, we don't want people to be taking these running spaces from native women who have come from communities from someone who isn't. And I think there is a line that sometimes you have to draw, like you can't, this is not right. And so that's something that has happened more in Canada with their different kind of like professors but here
Oh,
I feel like it's coming down here to the US. I mean, I get this all the time where people say I'm part Cherokee, you know, and and I'm just kind of like, I listen, but I never like, but I sometimes it's like, it's just one of those things where you're like, you kind of know when they're just saying that. And, and I don't, if, because right now, when I meet Native women, I say, hey, where are you from? Where's your community? Boom, boom, boom. No one should have any problems telling you that they're Native by saying, yeah, I have no issues. This is my family. This is where I'm from. But yeah, so I do get that. I am Cherokee a lot.
well, it just makes me think of that one teacher. She was like a college professor. I think it was maybe
Mm-hmm.
the last few years that she was in the news. And it's like,
Right.
come on. But it also puts things in perspective for me. Again, I'm in Miami, and that's actually one of the questions that but I think it has a different significance for you. In Miami, I dislike when people ask me, where are you from? And
Mm-hmm.
for me, it has more to do with there's something other about me and people are trying to figure it out. Whereas
Yeah.
for you, it's
Right.
more of like, where's your community? Like it's a different, there's a different intention behind that question. But here it's anytime I get that question, and I'm like, I'm from here. And then they're like, yeah, but where are you from?
Where are you from? Yeah.
I'm like, well, my family's Colombian, and that's something that I appreciate you mentioned about people reconnecting with their communities, because I've seen that within myself of growing up very much so. I'm first generation American here, born in the States, and growing up more connected to the Colombian culture
Right.
and
Mm-hmm.
family. I mean, and through music and food. And then once I entered middle school, all of a sudden that's the peer pressure of fitting in with everybody. And
Right.
I definitely pushed away from that. And now as an adult, I have trying to reconnect with that. But even then, it's other because I speak Spanish well enough that people who speak English are like, oh, okay, she speaks Spanish, but not well enough for people who speak Spanish native can say, I
Mm-hmm.
speak well enough. So there's, whenever I get that question of, where are you from? I'm like, it's because you're trying to fit me in a box and it doesn't
Right.
make sense. But I think with you and the way you phrase that questioning, again, it's that collectiveness, like that
Right.
not where are you from? And I think that's the difference. It's not where are you from, but where do you come from?
You're
Right?
right.
Where are your roots? And that's, for me it is a challenging question to answer, because I don't feel like, I mean, I don't know what being an American is. I don't necessarily feel quite like that, but then I also don't feel like I'm Colombian either. Like I
Right.
feel like I'm in this blended space in between. So it's interesting to think of how you have this running community, but it's not just about running, right?
Right. Right.
It's
Yeah,
about
it's a lot. Yeah.
it's about how they're showing up and then how they're building community with everyone. And I think that's a big, and I'm sure you know it, that's also a big responsibility for you to carry.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And I think too, for our women, a lot of them are healing from just their own trauma and loss. And I think it extends way back to like historical. And I feel like that's the one major feedback I've gotten is Native women telling me how much they appreciate this space because they run in honor of loved ones who've passed, or they run in honor of just being out there and healing. Because one of the things that they often say is running's our medicine, it's our prayer, it's our healing. You know, it helps us through our grieving. And if you follow my journey, I'm very open about my story. And I think as a leader, when you share your story, I think it resonates for a lot of people. I mean, I grew up with no privilege. I grew up in a very hard circumstances with so much loss at a young age and just recently. Um, and I think when you share that with other Native women, they know and they understand and they get it. And I think that's the feedback too that we've gotten, that we're all running to heal and we're coming together as sisters to kind of help us through. I mean, I had two of the Native women who who ran for New York. One was running in honor of her daughter who passed at 4, and she had a rare disease. And like, that's so powerful to know that we gave her that opportunity for New York City Marathon to grieve and run in honor of her daughter. And another gal who ran in honor of her father who passed 2 years ago, to give them that dream on such a major race, but also helping them in that journey is what I love about this work. Because when I run, I have my individual story, but I'm going to bring 5 people with me. Like, I think that is the work that I do, is like, I'm always bringing my community with me. And again, that's what brings me joy, is these stories of, thank you so much for this opportunity. I never thought I would be at New York City. And I think that really just keeps me moving when things get really hard, or maybe a race company is not responding like I want to. I have to remember what this work is about. So,
All right. How do you keep the healing moving forward?
with just the whole, with women in general, or
Yeah,
myself?
I think with
Yeah.
both. I mean, I feel like from you, it's going to ripple out into everything else that you do. But I love this idea, and I've heard it before, of that generational healing, right? Where me in this lifetime, I can heal 7 generations behind me and then work to heal the 7 generations forward. How do you see yourself in the work that you're doing when it comes to that healing forward?
I think for me individually, I always share about how I work on myself. I think oftentimes it's easy to project our trauma or our unhealed things on people. And I experienced that in that work. I mean, you know, we had some really horrible stuff happen to us in regard of almost canceling us, you know, and I knew it wasn't about me. And all the things you know, I can share with you all the screenshots that I took and of people coming after me when part of me is like, this is not my issue. Like, you have your issues. You obviously are projecting it on me. And I think that's what I learned is people can easily do that. And as a leader, I can project that on people. I could call out people easily. I could call out race company, but I feel like I have a boundary. I still am gracious and kind, you know, where I am not calling them out, which I could, but I still have that, like I have values in my life. And I think I'm working on myself through therapy. I am processing things instead of like reacting to something and taking time to process that and how I don't even sometimes have to react. I just have to let it go. So I think that is helpful for me as an individual, which projects into my leadership. You know, letting my leadership team know when we went through some hard stuff, don't say anything. I know you want to defend us, but having to have to hold myself, I take a lot of arrows, like, and a part of me is like, how am I reacting to this? I think that's huge. And I didn't know that until whatever we went through, I had to make sure that I was careful, even today, like how I perceive myself, what I say, because some people are wanting to bring me down and our organization when we're doing this amazing stuff that's so good for our community. But again, I always say, I don't speak for all Native people, Native women or Native runners. And so I feel like that's been really helpful in how I lead Native woman running and making sure that when I meet a Native woman runner anywhere in public, I embrace them. I tell them they belong because that's what really matters to me. If you choose to follow us and choose to be part of this, yes. But if you don't, then that is on you. I'm not forcing anyone to be part of NWR. If you want to be this, we're going to take you in and we're going to help you as much as we can. And just really also saying we're not perfect. We're always learning. So I think those things have really helped. It's not easy, but it's working.
Yeah. And I think I want to add a little footnote to that of there's lots of different communities out there. And it's
Right.
okay if this one isn't the one for you. And it's okay. That's totally
Right.
fine. There's enough people looking for belonging. Go find your space. And
Exactly.
that's something, and I'm saying that, not Verna, I am. So if anyone's going to come at anybody for that, you come at me. And I say that because even for myself in you know, the run coaching that I do or teaching yoga, things like that, it takes a lot of vulnerability, but also a lot of strength to recognize like I'm not the person for everyone. And that's
Exactly.
okay because there is another person, another community out there. Go find them. If this isn't your space, no harm done. Like it's no harm done. You can come, you can look, you can see, and then if you decide it's not yours, just continue on your way.
Yeah,
You don't need to comment. You don't need to say
exactly.
you don't need to say anything. Just continue on. Just go. Let us do what we're doing and it's fine.
Exactly.
And I
And I
think
think that's with the internet, you know, that's the
yeah,
hardest part about the
I
internet is
was
like
gonna say, and again, this is coming from my mouth, not Verna's mouth, of that not everyone is entitled to an opinion, even though we feel like we are entitled to one. You're not entitled to your opinion. Like
right.
that's part of, you know, social media. I love it, I appreciate it, but it's one of those things where it's like not everything needs to have an opinion on it, right?
Exactly.
Like if you don't like what we're doing, then it's okay. Continue on. Go find
Exactly.
another group. Totally fine. We're going to keep on
Exactly.
doing what we're doing because that's what's working. So, all right, I have two more questions for you.
Yes.
And this first one is where can actually I have three more questions. Where
Mhm.
can we connect with you and find out more information either about you or Native women running?
Yes, Instagram. I'm on Instagram, like my personal, and then we're on Facebook, Native Woman Running on Instagram and Facebook. We are on Twitter, but I rarely check that. And we're also on, I have a TikTok account for Native Woman Running. So those are the ways people can connect. We have a website, www.nativewomanrunning.com. It just kind of gives some information about us. And then we yeah, so those are some ways we always tell people to follow us, like especially allies, people who say, how can we support Native women running? Follow our accounts. And if we do have events, we always ask people to, like, you are welcome to be part of these events. And I think those are some of the ways people can connect with us.
Question number two is, what do you personally have coming up that we can celebrate you in?
Oh gosh. So I so I am very like quiet about my running. I mean, I have a
Oh,
big
you don't have to
following.
tell us what you're doing, but if there's something exciting on the horizon.
Well, I mean, the last couple of weeks have been pretty busy for me, which I've, made it to the cover of Runner's World, which is pretty exciting because I didn't think what was said in my interview with Runner's World was never mentioned about me being on the cover with all these other amazing runners. So when I was tagged and someone reached out to me and said, Verna, did you see this? I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, I didn't realize. And it was kind of like the week when I was like in New York City Marathon, and I was just so busy that I was like, oh, so I feel like that's a huge celebration. And also ABC Prime Live with Lindsay Davis they did a feature on me and my story. And that was just like when you get to that point, you're like, and it all happened within like a week. So many, like I was in New York City bringing a team. I was on the cover of Runner's World. I was like on the ABC, like live with Lindsay Davis. And so it just came at me and I just felt like I didn't have time to process it until I got home. So those are some of the things. And yeah, so I feel like I've reached a really good point in running that I am celebrating that and I'm still on that high. So I'm really happy about that.
I love that. All right. Final question is just, do you have any final words for us today?
Yes, I think it's just, follow Native Women Running, learn about our culture, learn about who we are as Native people. We're still here. We've always been here. And we're here to celebrate our journeys. And always, I think one of the things is I always ask people to always acknowledge the land that they're running on, whether you are in the middle of a city or in the middle of a trails on a mountain, that is native lands. And so we always ask people, take that time to acknowledge where you're at. And I think that's really important for other people who, especially non-natives who don't realize that it's pretty powerful experience if you just take those few moments.
Yeah. And with that said, I'm coming from Miami, Florida, where I'm going to acknowledge Miccosukee, Seminole, and Calusa that we're here. And I have shifted my own wording of I don't own a house. I'm a steward of this
Yeah,
land right
Stuart
now.
Land, yep.
I'm a steward of this land right now, and I am doing my best to love this land and honor this land for all those that didn't get the chance to do so because someone took this land and did stuff on it.
Exactly.
Here we
Yes,
are.
thank you.
Here we are. So I want to thank you for that. And I will put in the show notes. There is a really, really neat website that you can enter your address and you can enter where you live, and it'll tell you what are the
Exactly.
communities, the native communities that lived on that land, that still live on that land. So I'll make sure to include that in the show notes so that people can, educate themselves if they're curious in understanding just where they come from and where they're
Exactly.
so,
Well,
Verna,
thank you.
thank you so much for being here, for talking to me today. Everyone, we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.